Welcome to the Unleashing Leaders podcast, where we work with willing leaders to accelerate the changes you seek. We'll learn from the experiences of different leaders facing real challenges and distill practical, purposeful steps to apply in your context. I'm Lee Scott, your curious co-pilot. Together, let's make positive changes for our companies and communities.
Welcome back to the Unleashing Leaders podcast. Today, we're joined by an amazing thought leader, and the gentleman has become a good, trusted friend and a fellow business partner, Ross Thornley. He is based out of southern UK, kind of near Stonehenge, for those of you who think that's pretty cool. He is the author of several books. His main signature book is Decoding AQ, which is decoding the adaptability quotient. He's done a lot of great pioneering work and synthesis on what are the conditions, the competencies, the characteristics, and the behaviors of a highly adaptable leader, looking at it from a very holistic perspective. And today we're here to talk about adaptability during chaotic times, with a particular emphasis looking on the inner work of leadership. Ross, it is great to have you on the show. Finally, my friend, it's been a couple of years, but you're a busy guy, I'm a busy guy, but we were able to get all the stars to align. Great to have you here.
I appreciate that. Yes. And being able to do it when we're at our best selves, right, makes a difference. So thank you for that.
We had to be a little adaptable to get to this conversation about adaptability. So, and I know we share a deep passion for this subject and a similar compassion for the work that we do. So I've gotten to know you over several events over the years, primarily X Prize and things like that. But you're an amazing dude. Tell our listeners a little bit, what's your origin story? Where did you first recognize a spark for an interest in all things leadership and change?
I think, it's always easier to connect the dots backwards, right, of things. In the moment, you don't necessarily realize or know. But I think it was being curious and observing others. I've been an entrepreneur, I would say 99% of my working career. I had a little start at the beginning in a few organizations, but as an entrepreneur, you're always looking at your environment, looking at who's around, who are you inspired by. And there was a lot of leaders, certainly initially, in my peer circle, right, in the industry I was in and the region I was in. And as you read more...
What industry was that, Ross, just for...
The first version of me was a brand and marketing guy.
Okay. Listeners, do your very best not to hold that against him. He's actually a good guy. I'm telling you, he is.
And, as I learned along that journey, that is really just understanding people, the psychology of people, what makes us do the things we do, right? And the decisions that we make. And then observing the good and the bad of that, good leadership, bad leadership, as you're trying to build your own business and equally trying to support the businesses that you're serving that are going through different challenges of both opportunity and of, setbacks. So my interest in leadership was around how that impacts people, how that impacts economics of business and organizations, and then latterly the social impact across society. And the interest then grew through books and people, really, and then the combination of lived experience along that way.
Yeah. Well, the power of a great book is that it is a way to connect with people that you might not ever get a chance to physically meet in person, right? And so, it still all boils down to people. Well, and fast forward to today, you get to do some pretty amazing transformation work across the globe, Ross. Tell us a little bit about your current organization, the type of work you do, and the type of clients that you work with.
Yeah, and I think it comes, so joining all that origin and that interest into today, I think one of the common threads has been coaching in terms of my witnessing of others that I admire, investment in coaching, and then my own investment in coaching that unlocked a new level of what I could see, what I could think about, and what I could experience. And so that common thread, somebody we both know of, Dan Sullivan at Strategic Coach, has been a real significant impact in who I have become, and therefore the work that I do and as a community, the work that we do, that coaching is a key thread of that. So whilst we have, yes, been working on distilling and understanding adaptability, how and to what degree does an individual adapt? What are the whys and the whos from the character side and the environment of when somebody does, levels of psychological safety, and then how that collects up into team data and organizational data. So what we do within organizations and for individuals is to start off with know your AQ, right? Know that data, know the baseline, know the benchmark. And from that basis, a fundamental thing comes through awareness is deciding, is this helping or hindering my new desired outcome? My new desired outcome to increase the innovation in my team, to reduce the work stress, to get a promotion, to launch a new product, to win a piece of business, whatever the outcome is the way I am behaving? Is the skills I have, are the decisions I'm making helping or hindering that outcome? And sometimes we don't know that till too late, right? And we are looking at the symptoms and outcomes, whereas our adaptability is often the root of that. So we start with that metric, and then we have a series of modalities of how that then shows up to improve adaptability of individuals. And so that is from the traditional debriefing, coaching. We've got a network now of over 450 certified partners and coaches around the world that are going and doing the work. They often talk about doing the work for inner self as well as, doing the work on how we apply these new competencies and capabilities. And then we do a lot of training. We have certifications, we have workshops, we do keynotes and all of those types of things to help people have a language for adaptability. Change. Oh, what is this? What does this really mean? Is it change management? Is it programs? Is it L&D? Is it training? What are all these things? Having a language around adaptability, and then these programs that roll out.
And to highlight that, I think a key differentiator is that you've leveled up. I mean, oftentimes when you are engaging, with a leadership coach or, like you said, a change management, they're there to achieve a change, right? And to achieve certain outcomes associated with the change. What you're really talking about doing is go one level deeper and be able to say, well, let's enhance the capacity for change. Right. So rather than I'm coaching you in golf to get better at golf, let me coach you on how to get better at anything. Right. So you're really unlocking their learning capacity, their curiosity, their inherent flexibility so that they can apply that to any change circumstance they're facing. And I think that going one order deeper, it might be a little more challenging, but like you said, that's kind of buried and there's not a language for that. And to be able to understand what those moving parts are and how do you isolate that anatomy and how do you flex it and strengthen it is pioneering work, Ross.
Yeah. And I think you brought up an interesting example and analogy there of, a sport of golf. Do you do the reps of the golf swing versus are you working on the nutrition of that human? Are you working on the flexibility, on the strength? So whether that person then plays golf or basketball or cricket,
or gardening or whatever
it is,
right? Yeah,
fundamentally, if they have a good mental discipline to be able to let go of a shitty shot, and
I'm still a little bent about that. Okay. You don't need to keep bringing that up. That was one time, Ross.
Well, it's interesting. I spoke to one coach who coaches professional golfers, and one of their athletes, he only has one shot that he ever remembers per club. So when he picks that club up, all he's got in his mental mind is the greatest shot he had with that club. And when he takes the next shot, he takes it, does it replace that memory or does it get binned? And so therefore, when he takes the next, it's gone. It's done. So every shot is a new shot. And all he's looking at is his best past performance of that club, of those things. And it was just an interesting way. So when we bring that into the work context of change, we often focus a lot on the change management in terms of the processes, the methodologies, the procedures, and a project with a start, a middle, and end, and all of these things. The reality of chaos and change now, where change is in an unpredictable fashion.
Multidimensional, no clear start.
Yeah, we're not doing change where we know how or we know the outcome. Everything now is a hypothesis of a potential outcome and a hypothesis of how, right? Because it shifts and changes even on an hourly basis, right? You might have had a startup, been successful. I was reading about one, raised 600 million, got great runway, great business. And within a week, Google launching some features for free that completely decimates that entire proposition of that organization. And so for us, our adaptability is about preparation rather than prediction. And so as an underlying root capability, skill, capacity to embed for individuals, for leaders, for teams, for organizations, it allows us to then be relevant whatever the new game is.
Yes.
Whatever the new process is, whatever the new tool that comes along.
It's not on knowledge of the conditions or the ability to predict future conditions. It's the ability to navigate enemy conditions. And I think, well, let's take a closer look at that, because you're seeing that with your clients. I'm certainly seeing that in the communities I'm operating, what are some of those patterns that are showing up with clients? Because I think we just had this recently where, that this team was feeling really stressed out and whatnot. And we're like, take a moment and appreciate the level of complexity, the level of overlapping factors. I was introduced to a term called a polycrisis, right? Like, multiple things hitting at multiple levels at multiple times, maybe with uncorrelated origins, but highly correlated impacts. And I was like, in that context, I think we're doing pretty great. And they were like, yeah, what was I comparing myself to? That was so ridiculous. I was just beating myself up. So let's talk a little bit about these chaotic conditions, and how do people get stuck in their heads? How do they get wrapped around the axle and feel terrible? And then let's work on a pathway out of that. But first, let's what are the patterns you're seeing?
I think the patterns we're seeing is more about our species in this new situation that we've just been talking about, right? Of that paradox and the poly-interruption of good and bad, right? Coming in. I saw a great, very recent TED talk where it was a journalist who, in 10 minutes, the first 5 minutes was the truth of the terrible world we live in. Right, of the polarization of the wars, of everything bad, 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 bad. And then 5 minutes on, the truth of everything good, 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 good. Which is true. Both are true. In parallel, in interlinked, intermixed of all of these things. And so what we're witnessing is this situation of excitement over potential, that we see these shiny objects, right? Technology often, or new people, new skills, new stuff, right? AI, here it is, whatever it might be that is there to increase, to grow, to increase our journey to transcendence, to increase our sales, to build better, more meaningful relationships, to win more things, games or money or promotions or recognition. And within that, what we're witnessing is an exhaustion of the human biology, the living in chronic stress. And yet we're trying to get people to learn new things, to embrace new ways of thinking, to problem solve using methods that are unequipped methods to solve problems that we haven't even got a handle around, with a biology that is hampering us. And we're trying to solve a lot of things cognitively that need to be felt, that need to be emotional, that need to be experienced. And what I'm witnessing is kind of two tracks within organizations. Ones that, are completely blind to that and are just running for it and saying, right, we need to solve this with traditional, let's get workshops, let's train more, let's do more of these things, and leave that woohoo for want of a better term, out from this because we're here to do work and work is serious. I'm under pressure. I've got targets to hit. I've got quarterly things to hit. I've got 30% productivity efficiency gains being told that I'm going to get if I implement this new software. So I've got to do it. I've got to do it. I've got to do it. And I think those have a burning, platform. They've got this incredible necessity and need to shift something because things are starting not to work. And getting this wrong, that's burnout, that's exhaustion. And burnout can be silent or really visible. It can physically get you, or it can be silent that I think I'm doing okay.
Yeah, but it just makes it. So what, if you don't mind me asking, Ross, could you paint a finer point on what might be a sign or a signal that, the collective factors of complexity are starting to overwhelm us, right? We're starting to have some burnout. We're starting to, we're continuing to bark up the wrong tree, but we don't realize that we're barking up the wrong tree yet, right? What are some of those earlier indications that a highly adaptable person says, wait a second, something's afoot here, versus, like you just said, blindly bulging ahead? What would be some signals or indicators a person could pick up on?
I think the signals for this are best seen, witnessed, and shared by an observer. And so the reality of awareness of self is limited, right? The paradox of we can't see ourselves. We try ever to know thyself, right? But the fundamental reality, when we're in the system, we can't see ourselves. So I think the responsibility to a certain extent of leaders to understand that and bring in themselves and others to be able to find those signals. So if it's that, it's this signal, it might be lack of sleep. It might be constantly feeling frustrated. It may be avoiding difficult conversations. Some of these things are basic stuff, right? We get frustrated by somebody. I don't really want to bring it up because I know it might piss each other off. We still got to work together. We've got to do these things. So I bury it till it breaks. And it's there. So these buried frustrations, emotions, we have lost, I think, a lot of the ability to have difficult conversations. And so the early signals are an avoidance of difficult conversations, right? There's a missing adaptation. And what's happening is it's manifesting in the shadows of the self and teams.
And I would maybe add to that to say, I think if there's not recognizing those signals, and then there's the first recognition of those signals, but I think there's a characterization of it that the signal is wrong. The signal is a sign that something is wrong. That's the aberrant part. That's the, unexpected part. And that will go away, if we just try hard enough or push hard enough or, or bury it deep enough, right? That somehow needs to be ignored or avoided. And I think maybe one of the first steps is to reframe that and say, no, that signal, rather than it being a sign that something's wrong, it's actually a precondition for growth. It is a precondition for an evolutionary leap that's about to happen. And the sooner you see that as a source of growth and transformation or change or whatever you want to call it, the sooner you can be adaptable. But as long as you're like, no, don't mind those icebergs melting, then you're not even creating the conditions for adaptability in the first place.
I think you've picked up on an interesting thing here. And the fact is, a signal is inert. It doesn't have a positive, a negative, a good, a bad, or whatever it is. That is purely by the interpretation of the mind, of the collective, of the culture, of those sorts of things. And so it requires a level of confidence, courage to face a signal and not either ignore it or to stigmatize it that it's an attack or it's, to be mitigated, it's to be controlled, it's to be prevented. And that's kind of maturity level 1 in the resilience model, right? Is monitoring and complying, and we prevent and control. As we then step up this might be a good model for our listeners to think about in this example. As we go up the resilience maturity, we get to noticing and responding. And what that shifts to is some levels of mindful action. So what you're talking about there is seeing it as growth, seeing it as a trigger for an opportunity for transformation. The next part after noticing and responding is actually we're looking to improve and exploit it. I want those signals. They are the building blocks for performance optimization.
Yeah.
So
I'm not worried when they're there. I'm worried when they're not. It's kind of like crazy children. You're like, if it's quiet, you're like, something's wrong.
So we shift from that monitoring and applying where we're preventing and controlling to the next stage of noticing and responding to mindful action, to the next of improving and exploiting it. So we get performance optimization. The next phase is actually imagining and creating signals. So for example, how this shows up is scenario training. So we see this a lot in the forces, right? Where military, police, fire will do scenario planning. So they'll create signals, right? They imagine them and create them. And what that does is it creates a new capacity that is preventative adaptive innovation. So rather than, I'm monitoring, complying, or I'm noticing, there's a fire over there, I've got to go and deal with it. I make a fire. I imagine and create it. I'm now in a state where I can look at preventative. I can look at innovation. The next place and kind of the top maturity of resilience is actually looking at balancing and managing those tensions. And that's where we can hold paradoxical thinking. So that is a great sort of thinking model to look at these signals of the maturity, even just looking at it through one of our dimensions of resilience, for example, that we might see it and, we're trying to prevent it, trying to control it, through to we can manage the paradoxical thinking that signal is both good and bad, is both there and not there. All of those things, how do we use that to drive? How do we use it to drive adaptive innovation that is at a base deep level that is irrelevant of the signal color or type, just that it's signal? And I have then prepared myself with mental flexibility, with unlearning, with hope, with all of these things, psychological safety, that whatever signal, whether you give me a golf thing, a tennis racket, a win, a loss, a good point, a bad point, I can create value, relevance, and forward movement to my desired outcome. That's adaptability intelligence.
Yeah. So let me back up and anchor, because see this, we talk about not having language for it, and you have, committed a good chunk of your life work to creating the language for it, and you just spewed some amazing stuff. So let me just distill it and precipitate a little bit. So I heard monitor and comply, and then prevent and
control. So there are two at the same part. So if you think of this on an axis, this is a resilience maturity model. It's actually from the British Standards Institution, actually created a lot of this. So you have resilience maturity on one and time on the other. So the first step, monitoring and complying, the kind of behavior that you have with that is preventative control.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Okay, got it.
Next one up, the maturity level, is noticing and responding. And the behavior action that we see then is mindful action.
All right, got it. Okay. I was thinking if each of those was a separate level, that's where I was getting a little lost.
Yeah. So the next one up that you see as the maturity is improving and exploiting. And then the behavior is performance optimization. The next maturity level is imagining and creating. And the behavior we see is preventative adaptive innovation is actually the behavior we're seeing. And then the final, sort of evolution of resilience is balancing and managing tension is the maturity level. And the action that you get, the behavior you get, is paradoxical
thinking. All right. Okay. Now,
just as one model.
Yeah, no, it was great, but it's a way to help, again, versus how do I get through, this career change? How do I get through this, big project implementation go live that we have coming up on July 18th? It's now like, hey, how do I strengthen resilience, which is one component of my overarching adaptability? And I can have a language about how I can isolate and develop those muscles to say, like, well, are you looking? Right. And then when you look, are you noticing? And when you notice, are you responding? Now are you improving? Now are you imagining in advance? And then now are you, balancing the tension? So I now have the scale that helps me to build that muscle, and then I can apply it to whatever change.
Look at the subtle reframe of at the base levels where a signal will show up. Am I complying and controlling it? Or when the signal shows up, am I exploiting it and optimizing it? Yeah. Just even at those sorts of things, the signal is a signal. But your maturity of thinking in that aspect then will have a difference to your reaction or response.
Yeah, absolutely. And the efficacy thereof, right? And one, you get buffeted around, and the other, you're more the proactive character of the story. And it doesn't mean you're always right. Like you might, initiate and respond, and you're like, oops, wrong bet, but then that goes to the other skills of unlearning and hope and everything else that all adds it together.
I want to add a quick piece on when you asked the first question of what are the sort of signals that show up. And I said, well, really, you need someone else to help you observe that. What you can do as yourself is to recognize any kind of experience and place an observer's mindset to that. So this, again, is a language piece. So let's say a project doesn't achieve its outcome, and somebody might then describe that to another person as saying, I'm a failure, right? And they will label the experience and result in absolute closeness to themselves. I am a failure, right? I didn't do this. As opposed to, I've observed failure. It's not labeled to me. And so that acknowledgement that you're not the result, right? So we decouple ourselves from that. So that's
laminate those two things so that
so we can in self-reflection play an observer's role and then use small subtle reframes of language when we articulate to others, articulate self-story, is to just decouple that result from ourselves rather than I am a winner, right? In the other sense, that's me. No, I observed, I witnessed, I was part of winning. It wasn't me.
Yeah. My identity, my soul, my whatever is a related, but a untethered, unconnected thing. And therefore they can exist. And I think what that does is that removes a lot of the barriers to adaptability with, unhealthy ego, right? Like, well, to protect my identity, well, I don't want to be a loser. Well, now let me, deny, suppress, whatever that I'm going to do to make the story that, no, I was a winner, or worse, I was a victim. And you're like, no, you're really none of those things, right? You're an observer of a situation that had positive and negative things in it. And, those might be characterized as winning or losing, but, you're an actor in it, you're not the story itself.
All of those things exist.
Yeah.
What channel have you tuned into for what then the self story is? And a lot of this comes back to your point about the inner work and links to a lot of, sort of spiritual practices. And what I was talking about there is another framework that I sort of distilled into the book. And it's one of my, Dan Sullivan talked about one of my superpowers. Often when the room's been talking for a period of time, 10 minutes, an hour, whatever, he will purposely invite me at the end to surmise, right? The contextualizer. And that's been a superpower of mine, is a contextualizer, to listen, ask great questions, and then contextualize into frameworks, into actions, into those sorts of things.
Which hails back to that root you talked about in your origins of just having a genuine curiosity for people, right? And looking and saying, what is driving those behaviors and what is driving those decisions? And so, you've tuned that listening ear and eye and smell all along. And now you're able to apply this surmising ability.
Yeah. And I, to the extent at which I can at this point in my life, put my best efforts to not exist in an echo chamber. And what I mean by that is we can all spend time with the people who look, sound like us, think like us, and consume all the things that point further evidence to that. Same books, same TV programs, same stuff, right? To contextualize and consolidate when you're already in a thin pipe isn't super valuable, for me to cross disciplines, to read about quantum mechanics, to watch Korean series on Netflix, to truly actively, you mentioned about you had a family goal plan to get, fourth, third, second, first, was it Dan in the same year for karate?
Yeah, third degree, second degree, first degree, or Dan black belts as a family, and do it simultaneously, right? Yeah.
That is beautiful. So the intent I've given myself for some time now is to collect eclectic content from multiple sources that sometimes make me feel bloody uncomfortable. And that will help with perspective. It will help with paradox, and it will give incredible value of contextualization, because you're bringing, read the book, The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels. It's so against me. I'm a vegan. To work with a company whose supply chain is the world's slaughterhouses, because they're the largest, pet food manufacturer in the world. These counter positions is that, no, I'll never work with it. We all have boundaries, non-negotiables, certain things. Other bits, do I put myself into that position?
But I can hear it. It doesn't mean I have to agree with it, right? And that's that highest level of holding that tension of paradoxical, contradictory concepts. And then finding, in some cases, there's more common ground there than I realized. Yeah. And finding in some cases, there's an aspect I didn't see before. Maybe it even anchors and strengthens your original presuppositions, but now you have greater evidence for it. So all of those things are possible, but you have to be willing to consume it. Yeah.
And that's the art of a true scientist, right? Is to be curious, to have a hypothesis, to not be wedded to say, I need it to prove what I already had, what I already felt. And so much in business, so much in leadership is proving my point or covering my ass. It's not discovering what I really need to know or what was really there.
Did you see that for the first time in many years, Harvard just untenured a professor, and this just happened. This has been an investigation over the last several years, apparently. But the irony is that this particular, and again, I've only read 2 articles on it, so I don't know the whole story. So if I'm getting it wrong, but the irony is this professor's work was all around dishonesty. And distilling the elements of dishonesty and what drives it and how do you correct it and all this stuff. But it turns out that they were falsifying their research to prove their points of dishonesty. And you can't make this stuff up, man. It's like, wow. Anyway, like at what point did something signal to say, maybe you shouldn't do that? But hey, if you're studying dishonesty long enough, I guess you start to absorb it, right? It was just fascinating what games our brains can do to protect ourselves from reality.
It is. And I think it's not necessarily what I've witnessed, out and out design at the beginning. It's a slow attrition of fostered acceptability. So we see this in things like Breaking Bad, right? What a great series. It was a little bit, and your tolerance shifts, the acceptability to self and others shifts. You see that they might start out with an incredible intent. I remember looking at the following the work of that lady that was doing the one drop of blood, Theranos or something, raised loads of fun. Great initial intent, but over time, pressure. You can see, investment pressure, all of these sorts of things, to then start to make bad decisions, falsify information, become dishonest. But you might be underpinned not with a holistic view of at somebody doing bad things in the world. They're trying to do good things, but they've got lost along the way.
Unintentionally compromising, and then it's intentionally compromising, and then it's just too compromised to recover.
And it comes back to AQ, right, of our adaptability. What do I not change, and what do I change? A lot of people think, adaptability is about always being flexible. It's also about, what do I say no to? What am I stable in? What is staying the same? That's so important for an individual to know, for a leader to know, for the team underneath that leader to know. Those are the framework to help decisions.
Well, and when you think about, from a biological perspective, species, a species adaptability, when a species adapts and there's a speciating event, there's now 2 species where there was one, when you look at their DNA, it's a tiny, tiny, tiny fragment of the overall DNA that actually changed. I mean, most of our DNA is still, very similar to a bacteria's DNA, right? I mean, like it's only a fraction of changes here and there that make radical changes to how an organization or a community responds to changing environmental conditions. So I think it's a great point to re-echo that even in the most trying, changing times, there's usually a fraction of material that's actually changing that creates your ability to adapt.
I think one of the things that, we're living in this reality of chaos. We see headlines everywhere of another insert several thousand people losing jobs, losing roles, insert technology going, wow, it can create, and do this, to humanoid robots being deployed at scale by Figure One, by all these companies that, I read articles that say there's going to be more humanoid robots than humans within my lifetime, doing work. And what does that mean? So if we take away cognitive things with AI and we take out physical things with humanoid robots, what's left? And these are the philosophical and economical and social conversations of our time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the work that we're doing to help navigate and coach is where we're shifting from management, efficiency, productivity of SOPs, of predictable, into we need, and I think it is the wave of coaching. It's the wave of coaching as the core modality to help people through uncertainty, through chaos.
Yeah.
And that coaching that shows up tied in with then the blending of, blending in training, development, coaching,
scenario practice, where you talked about
scenario practice. That was one of the products we've just launched, a simulation studio for scenario practice of adaptability. And we've been doing this with organizations, and it's fascinating as a way in which to improve our adaptability skills. And so the kind of element that I wanted to touch on that is so of now, I've been to several conferences recently where the theme, and I think every industry, the theme of AI is so front and center for leaders right now of what are we doing? How are we doing it? How are we getting adoption? What are we leveraging? And something fell really funny to us. Our company brand and name is AQai, right? And we voiced the phrase AQ comes before AI. And we started to explore that. We started to explore that in conversations of AI, it's a new technology. I shift from a knife to a fork, from a tennis racket to a golf, from this technology to this technology. The fundamental underpinning piece of AI in yourself, in your business, in your team, in your industry is the adaptability. So our adaptability intelligence comes before AI. And it was just a real serendipitous moment of AQai. AQ comes before AI. And that triggered an understanding with people that are, right now, I'm in this situation. I'm in a chaotic situation. I've got reorgs to go through. I've got to try and, deal with, skills transformation in my organization. I've got to deal with this. I've got to deal with this. I've got to adopt AI. I've got to get this new thing in. And the merging of, say, HR and IT we're starting to see in organizations. AQ comes before AI. And that, I think, was a really interesting one for us to figure out in our place in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And where we can really serve.
Yeah, always drives it. Well, I know we're getting close to our time here, so I was hoping to cover maybe just two other things before I know you're busy and got to get back to changing the world. So let's get a little tactical in this. So given that AQ comes before AI, not looking for a silver bullet. I know there's many moving parts. You've mentioned a few times the power of coaching, but you and I've also seen a lot of charlatan coaches out there, right? So practically speaking, somebody's not able to hire a Ross or a Lee or an AQ coach or a UL coach. What's one dimension of coaching that they could start leveraging with the people already around them that could help them enhance one aspect of their adaptability? Like, so what would be one example of a thing?
Well, I've got a couple of quick thoughts on that. If people have listened to this and said, they have 3 types of experience around it, right, of coaching. Not heard of it, haven't implemented it. I've had it and I've had a bad experience. I've had it and I've had a good experience, right, in there. And depending on that,
all true, right?
all
Possibly
true,
simultaneously. Yep,
there's maybe another one, I have heard of it, but haven't tried it, or I can't afford it, can't deploy it to anyone below a P3 or whatever it may be. And yes, there's good and there's bad in that mix. What can we do when we don't have that? If you're curious about it, there's great books out there, and coaching starts with great questions, and then shutting up, listening in that process. So we can be a great coach to ourselves through journaling, and there's some great questions around, to journal, to coach ourselves, because what we do is we recognize, we reflect, we reimagine, and then we can respond. And so that 4-phase process of transformation can come through that questioning without judgment. Oh, I'm asking this question because I really want to punish myself. I'm asking this question because I really want to celebrate myself.
Well, using the example you shared earlier, a question could be, how can I look at this as the observer? Right? Not the identity. And it's like, I'm a winner, I'm a loser. It's like, ooh, I was an observer of winning, I was an observer of losing. Like, that's a question you could ask yourself that gives you some perspective. Be able to ask yourself the question is like, okay, what level of resilience am I demonstrating here? I learned this 5 scale from these 2 crazy guys. Am I noticing and observing, or am I improving and implement? I can ask those kind of questions to help trigger my thought process in a constructive way.
Where in my life are components am I not living up to my expectations, of what I would like in a situation? I'm at a queue at the airport, and I reflect after that, and where did I not live up to the expectations of a best version of me?
Oh, please tell me you did not have 3 bags when they told you you're supposed to have 2 bags. Like, you need to consolidate those, Ross. Okay.
Yeah. The thing is, there's for everyone, they have their triggers, have their various signals, right? And to rewire the neural net that trigger doesn't create the same response. The loud voice, the wagging finger, the walking out the room with a slammed door, the argument, the passive aggressive, the whatever versions of you, the shadow versions.
So that's another question. Am I reacting or am I responding? Right? Classic.
So we can do those things, tactically, ask ourselves more questions. But I think the state in which we ask the question is really important. So a very practical, tactical thing we can do, especially when we've had a difficult situation, is to have an adult tantrum. And if any of you are pet owners, dog owners, when you witness your dog and you take them on a walk, you'll notice they do a shake, right? After they've had a stressful situation.
A husky shake, yep.
A husky shake. And what's happening in that process is it's actually using up part of the chemicals that have been flooded into the system to help them, right?
Yeah,
so they've been flooded by adrenaline, by cortisol, by that type of thing. And if they don't use it, it stays in the body. It stays in the body, and it'll show up as tension and eventually disease, cancers, all sorts of other things, because we haven't used it. So in work and in adult life, we suppress that tension point. As kids at 2 years old, they have a tantrum. They do that physically and verbally and in every sense of the way. So if we're asking ourselves,
that's why we were doing martial arts. We would go and just beat each other up, and then that way we get all that stuff out, right?
So I think there's a multiplier and a subtractor. So the question itself can be subtracted if I'm asking it in a impaired state. If my body is under adrenaline, cortisol, pressure, frustration, all of those things physically and mentally, I'll be compared to even, think of that question, respond to that question in truth, all of those things. So I think it needs 2 parts. Yes, questions, but consider the state that I am in myself. So a great adult tantrum is one where we physically, you might, as you say, martial arts, that might be great if it's a Tuesday at 2:00 when you're doing it. What is it if we've just had that Zoom session, or we're in the workshop, go to the toilet, do whatever, and physically have the movement, right? Physically have that movement. You can voice it, you can shout, you can do those things. And importantly, after that, is to hold ourselves. Quite often, what is valuable, people find, is to hold near their heart center. Allow that breath to slow and say, I am safe, I am safe, I am safe. And watch the shoulders move, watch the face move, and do that. If they do that before they interrogate the recognize, the reflect, the reimagine, they have shifted into almost a state of coherence. So anyone who looks at their HRV trying to get coherence, it's the signal between different parts of the body, heart, mind, all of these things that allow us. And it's our second part of the pyramid of needs that I created in the book as a nod to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I created the adaptability pyramid of needs. So first phase is know my numbers, do my AQ, get the framework. The second phase is actually manage my state of physical unity between my mind and my body, get to coherence. Without doing that, I can't do any other work. I can't decouple self-identity. I can't remodel. I can't release. I can't forward frame.
I can't unlearn. I can't
any of those things.
None of it. Yeah.
So really, what can I do? A tactical example right now. Not only ask good questions, but look at state of coherence. Some people find that through meditation. Some people find that through a walk in nature. Some people need a blowout in the martial arts. Find yours, play with yours.
Yeah.
Look at it to get to coherence so that you can silence that amygdala response, the physical response of stress, because it doesn't know the difference of a memory of that call that I had with that person that pissed me off or the actual call. So every time I rethink of it, I'm reliving that past and my body is responding in the same
chemical composition. This is great. Ross, thank you for this tidbit. I know there's so many more that we can get in your book. So appreciate you sharing that one. So to close this out, Ross, you got some exciting things coming up. Tell us a little bit about what's next with your work and where folks can stay connected with you as you pursue that pioneering breakthroughs that you've always sought.
I feel I'm a custodian to the business in its current state, and both actor and observer in the network of moving forward about adaptability. So AQai.io is the website. Check me out on LinkedIn, Ross Thornley on LinkedIn, in terms of if they're curious, want to figure out a little bit more in this. So I'm excited about a couple of things we're working on at the moment. All of it aimed to how do we make sure no one's left behind, right? So in the fastest period of change, how do we make sure they're not left behind? We've got a huge research study that we're pulling together around adaptability leadership. We've put together an equivalent of $1 million fund, which what that equates to is 500 organizations can put 20 of their leaders through our assessment if they qualify, funded. So it gets them started, it gets them going, they can apply online, and we can get them going so that they can at least get that base level of 20 leaders. Where's the AQ? That will form out some great research, some great pieces. There's a few other things, as there is in research, tying it to outcomes, a commitment to sharing some of that data, and everyone then gets access to the reports and those sorts of things. So I'm super excited about that.
Where can they find out about your global research study?
That is a really good question. And there is an actual specific website for it that I can't remember right now, but I think it is something like the Global Adaptability Index.org, something like that. We'll get it.
Okay. All right. No worries. Will there be linked to that from your AQai.io website, do you think? Okay. All right. So you said that one earlier. So we'll just say go there and then you'll bridge from it.
You'll find it.
So
the other two quick things that I'm excited about alongside that global research study is how do we democratize coaching? So you mentioned human coaching is great, but you can get good and bad, and it's expensive. A lot of people are working on using technology to solve that, AI coaches. We've been working hard on ours that has a couple of unique aspects. One, the corpus of IP and knowledge around human adaptability. So all of our research, all of our science, all of those things consolidated into one corpus of knowledge. We have a pattern around this, all of these things inside it. So that's one thing that makes it really interesting as an AI coach. The second part, it will know your profile. So it will understand your level of resilience, your mental flexibility. So when you're working on it to solve a problem, to boost a project, to have a difficult conversation, it's contextually already set up to serve you. So that aspect to get further reach of AI coaching and to augment human coaching in the in-between, right? And then the third piece, I mentioned it earlier, but this simulation studio, I'm super excited about because it's fun. It has unlocked. I had one experience with 14 senior leaders, and we ran this in London following a session we'd done in Munich with the same company. And after the event, I'm sat outside, I'm on the sofa kind of debriefing with the other facilitator. And one of the people came up to me and said, that was the most valuable session I've had in my 27 corporate year life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it was the second time we've run the thing, right, of scenario planning.
So are you saying the next shot's going to be as good as that swing, or it goes in the bin, right? Is that
yeah,
your news?
You got it. You got it. So we're evolving that one out. We're learning as we're doing it. We're co-building. That's what we do. We co-build with our audience and our clients, and that's what's fun. That's what I love doing. Is the clients that want to co-build, want to co-elevate, and be involved in that co-creation, as opposed to it's all done.
Yeah.
No, you need some responsibility too.
Well,
we've got some great stuff. So do you. Let's add it together.
Yeah, the notion of done is inherently contradictory to the notion of adaptability, right? It is never done. Well, Ross, thank you so much for sharing some of your insights, some of your work, and a couple of practical tips that we can all face when we're seeing those early signs of silent burnout, frustration, and overwhelm.
Thank you for joining us today on the Unleashing Leaders podcast. Subscribe so you don't miss a moment that could be the key to your next breakthrough. Let's stay connected and contribute together by grabbing that @Unleashing Leaders handle on LinkedIn, YouTube, or your favorite network. This is Lee Scott. Keep learning, loving, and leading. Our future and our communities are counting on us.